Good morning, everyone. My name is Maria Carla Chicoen, and I am the Executive Director of Casa Cuba. I would like to thank you all for joining us today for Perspectivas, a series which Casa Cuba is so proud to present in partnership with the College of Business at FIU. Casa Cuba is an initiative of FIU to build a leading cultural center and think tank for the discussion and study of Cuban affairs and the celebration of the Cuban heritage. We have secured a prominent site on the FIU campus to build an iconic facility and received significant philanthropic support towards the upcoming design and construction of the center, including prestigious grants from the National Endowment for the Humanities and the Knight Foundation. Our future home will feature galleries for interactive exhibits, classrooms to teach FIU's more than 70 courses on Cuba, and a state-of-the-art venue for events, artistic performances, and dynamic programming, such as Perspectivas. Perspectivas represents Casa Cuba's vision to connect the past, the present, and the future of Cuba and the Cuban community from around the world. This program features prominent Cuban business leaders for intimate conversations on their Cuban roots and family story, their inspiring ascent to their present success, and their take on the future of their industries in our community at large. In these conversations, across the many individual stories of leadership, there is always a common inspiring element: the Cuban spirit of resilience, innovation, and grit. Perspectivas is just a taste of what you will experience at Casa Cuba. Today's conversation will explore the future of sports in digital media, with perspectives from our very own Aymara del Águila, Vicente Fernandez, co-founders and leaders of Sports Mania, and Angel Gonzalez, manager of Athlete Icons and Sports Originals at Facebook. They will be introduced by our moderator, Natalia Martinez Kalinina. Natalia is an organizational psychologist and technologist focused on merging innovation, entrepreneurship, and impact. Most recently, she led the expansion of the Cambridge Innovation Center, CIC, to Miami. Natalia has prior experience as a Chief Innovation and Technology Officer in the nonprofit sector and a strategy leader for technology companies. She is also the founder of Awesome Foundation Miami, Aminta Ventures, and the Immigrant Powered Initiative. She holds a BA in psychology from Harvard University and a master's in organizational psychology from Columbia University. I would like to thank Natalia, Aymara, Vicente, and Angel, four extraordinary leaders, Cuban leaders, for coming together in conversation this morning. Thank you also to our friends and partners at the College of Business and the Casa Cuba team for their hard work behind the scenes to coordinate this event. And thank you all for tuning in. I hope to see you at future Perspectivas and invite you to get involved in the historic effort to build our Casa Cuba. There are many ways to support the project and become a founder, and we need your help to make this dream a reality. Thank you and enjoy.
Thank you, Maria Carla. I hope everyone can hear me well. Okay, well, welcome everybody, and thank you again. I reiterate Maria Carla's thanks to Casa Cuba and FIU and the College of Business. These conversations have been, I think, really intriguing, and I'm very happy that we're keeping the series going during these unusual and uncertain times. So thank you all for joining us. Aymara, Vicente, and Angel are people, I can't see you, so I'm wondering if other people can. Are the videos on?
Yes. Videos are on our side.
Okay, I can see you now. Sorry, I couldn't see you earlier. I was like, I'm not sure what's happening. Okay, all right. Wonderful. Well, it's a pleasure to see some familiar faces. Obviously, I know two of you, but Angel, it's very nice to meet you here. So let's kind of set the stage. A quick moment of logistics for those folks who are joining us here today. We'll kind of chat through. I'll ask you questions. Obviously, if there's anything that you want to double click on or that you want to expand on, I think that is to the benefit of those who are joining us here, since you are all the experts and I'm just helping us get some conversation going. So anything you want to talk about that I haven't asked about, obviously feel free to pause and dive deeper if something seems exciting. And then we'll leave some room at the end for audience Q&A. So if you are in the audience, feel free to submit questions via the Q&A function. I'll be looking at them throughout our conversation. I'll pepper some in if I can, and if not, we'll definitely get to them at the end. So it's a pleasure to have you all here. So to kick us off, let's kind of set the stage so people have a little bit more information about who's joining us today. So tell us a little bit about each of you, your professional journeys, where you are today, obviously the context that we're talking about today. So Vicente, let's kick off with you.
Sounds great. So I'll let Aymara lead on my side. I know, as you can see, we're
Awesome.
shared like
Yes.
co-founders, mother-son team. And I think, like a lot of Cuban stories, obviously, it starts with family. And my family, like my story comes directly from Aymara's story. So I'll let her kick it off.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting us to participate on this panel. I first want to say that I'm truly so excited about Casa Cuba's mission to preserve our Cuban heritage and culture for generations to come. I think that's such an important mission. I love the statement that Maria Carla stated that it seems that there's a common thread of Cuban entrepreneurs that connect us, and that is our resilience, the spirit of resilience, innovation, and grit. I truly believe that that describes us so well. We find ways to reinvent ourselves and make our mark wherever we go. I was born in La Habana and arrived in the United States at the age of 4 with my parents, my brother, and my sister. My parents in the early 1960s, as many in that era, worked multiple jobs to maintain our family. They worked very hard, and through the years, they established their own corporation, and for 40 years, over 40 years, successfully ran that company. I've learned a lot from their work ethics, that absolute tenacity. And as soon as I graduated from the Art Institute of Fort Lauderdale, I entered the field of advertising. In the early 1980s, I started working at Ryder and Shield and Crispin, local Miami ad agencies. And shortly after, I joined Zuby Advertising. I was privileged to work alongside the amazing Tere Subizarreta, who became my mentor, and she was and is a pioneer in the Hispanic advertising of the United States, recognized as such. For 10 years, I experienced the incredible growth of Zuby going from a local Miami ad agency to a national powerhouse. And that was amazing. In 1995, I was a mom. Vicente was 4 years old at the time. And I loved my profession, always been a workaholic because I loved it so much. And I thought that if I opened up my own shop, I could possibly juggle the two roles a little better. So I opened up Aymara and Associates, and for 20 years, I had an international portfolio of clients that included Burger King, Marriott, Disney. I lived an incredible era. In that time, advertising budgets were flowing, ideas were limitless. It was a grand time. But then things started to change. In the 1990s, the internet was born. Everything started to change, going from being manual to computerized. So graphics, accounting, paperwork, everything went computerized. It was a big change. Then along came the smartphone. And the smartphone, as we all know, has become an extension of our hands, our minds, everything that we do to communicate, basically. And after that, Facebook was born, social media, then followed by Twitter. And so that began to take shape in our lives. And at that point is when I realized that there was an opportunity, and advertising was being disrupted by this technology and innovation. But as well as there was a disruption, there was an opportunity. Traditional media was being shifted, the budgets from traditional to social media. And I realized that, first of all, the sports fan has always been a very coveted audience for brands because of their consumer loyalty. As much as they are passionate about their favorite team and player, they are also very loyal to the brand that associates with that. So I thought that there was an opportunity to do something that with the new technology that existed could attract that demographic in a more viable way. At this point, it was 2012, and Vicente was now a sophomore at the University of Chicago. As a child, Vicente would come to my ad agency every day after school to do his homework. And he saw my business in action and my passion for marketing. So while he was in college, we would speak regularly, and he would ask me about my most recent TV shoots and campaigns. I would ask him about his studies and about his football. So it came a little bit of a surprise to him when at one point in one conversation, I brought up the idea that perhaps together, he and I could come up with a digital platform that would best serve the sports fan, given all of the new technology that existed. And I think he was taken aback because I'm not an avid sports fan, but I was an experienced marketer. So I figured if we could combine his passion for sports and savviness and my advertising skills, we could possibly create something that was more in line with today's needs and lifestyles and put something together. And at that time, I already had the name Sports Manias because it's all about the passion. And it's also Sports Manias in Spanish because mania is a Latin word and it could be global. So that was the initial way that Sportsmania was founded. And again, Vicente was the ultimate end user because he was the young sports adult that we would be attracting. And I figured we could create together whatever he thought that sports fans would want to see with personalized social media content and news feeds that would be delivered directly to them. And then once we had that audience, we could bring in advertisers to the mix. So with that call, I'll take it over to Vicente so he could tell you how that transformed into what we have today.
Yeah, thank you. So, as you guys have heard, immediately, like, there's just an incredible influence from family, from my grandparents to my mother, and family across the board. My dad with sports and my mom's side with the sort of entrepreneurial spirit, which I think is a very big part of our culture. So when she gave me that call, it was a little unexpected. I grew up a complete sports media kid, playing as many sports as you could think of. And both Angel and I guess, are very much a new wave of Cuban American athletes playing American football. That was a sport that resonated most with me growing up here in Miami, watching some really great Miami Hurricanes football teams at FIU. Fortunately or unfortunately, taking us down last year. But I grew up loving football. So as soon as I got the opportunity to play at the University of Chicago, I was all for it. And when I was there, I wanted to be as involved as possible. I was started the school's first student-run television station, which was broadcasting our games to our families back home because, again, we're always trying to make that connection. I was a sports editor for the student newspaper. I had an organization for students interested in going into sports, and I got this call, and I was like, you know what? I know how incredible my mom is as a businesswoman, and I know the vision that she has for these sort of things. So we started talking about it, and we found something that we thought really worked well. And we launched the app, and we built incredible technology, artificial intelligence, that would curate content on your favorite teams and your fantasy teams from social media. And as the sports media landscape was changing, we really thought that, bringing together the tweets from these beat writers and the videos that were being posted by the teams and the leagues themselves, to the analysis coming from fantasy experts and league experts would be a really powerful way of getting information to fans in this sort of new social media, digital media world. And it was going well. The technology was doing well, but what we learned really quickly is we needed a way to attract sports fans efficiently. We needed a way that, if you downloaded this app, you would immediately want to tell your friends. And Apple had just begun allowing third-party developers such as ourselves to create third-party emoji keyboards. And we thought, okay, if a fantasy keyboard, a sports emoji keyboard existed, every Sunday while fantasy football is happening, you're going to want to send an emoji of your starting running back as soon as he scores a touchdown to talk trash in your fantasy group chat. Or, as soon as the Miami Heat have a big game, back then you'd want to send a Dwayne Wade pull-up emoji. And that was sort of the philosophy. And the idea was, if you got one of those emojis and you'd never seen it before, you'd ask, where the heck do you get this and how can I get it too? And thankfully, that's what happened. We started seeing really incredible growth. We went from having tens of thousands of monthly active app users to hundreds of thousands of monthly active app users. And, with the support of some great investors, including, an incredible sort of Cuban American investor in Jorge Mas and Mas Equity Partners, we were able to really take that next step as a business. And that Super Bowl Sunday, we actually ended up hitting the #1 top sports app in the App Store, above the NFL, above ESPN, simply because fans wanted to talk about the game. They wanted to message their friends, and whether they're fans of that year it was the Carolina Panthers or the Broncos, you wanted to send a Cam Dab emoji as Cam scored, or an Omaha emoji as you saw Peyton Manning calling an audible. And from there, we partnered with the NFL Players Association. We became their digital licensee for Breakout product because of the success we were having with not only engaging fans, but to Aymara's initial vision, bringing advertisers into conversation. So you could have, Burger King crowning the fantasy player of the week, or you could have Gatorade, sort of a Gatorade athlete after a big game, sort of dumping a Gatorade shower onto your screen. And from there, we continued partnering with the different leagues and players association, including the MLB Players Association, Major League Soccer, and others. And heading into 2019, our big goal was, okay, we know that we're really good at driving users with these emojis and with the feeds. We know they're really good at driving engagement, and we're good at driving revenue and new brand engagement with fans through these techniques. But let's go wherever fans are. Let's not make them come to the app. Let's go take the experience to where they're already having their conversations. And we connected with the Instagram and Facebook team, Angel included, and we started sharing ideas, and they let us know that they really liked the emojis, and they wanted to find a way for them to for our emojis to make their way into Instagram stories, right? Which were absolutely taking off. So we got our emojis onto Instagram stories through a Giphy, through a verified Giphy channel. And within a few months, we were reaching now 300 million fans each month. And it was just sort of an incredible, huge sort of period of growth for us. And it continues. We've reached 3 billion views over the last year and a half. And as we continued down that success, we started collaborating with their team around augmented reality effects, AR stickers, and more to come, and have continued sort of that idea of let's go where fans are. So not only, now are we integrated directly into Instagram, but you will be able to see our emojis featured on things like ESPN. We were on every Monday Sports Center last season, when recapping the previous Sunday with emojis, with fun video clips. And we're integrated into a variety of platforms from, Google to TikTok and of course, obviously Facebook and Instagram. So that's where we're at today. We're really looking ahead in terms of how do we help fans express themselves in their conversations with friends, family, and fellow sports fans. And that's where sort of our connecting point, aside from obviously our friendship and our Cuban American background, comes in with Angel as well, is sort of driving that mutual mission forward.
Wonderful. Thank you. I love when panelists introduce themselves with so much depth that the first set of questions that I may or may not have had are already answered, because we can jump right away into more meaty topics. So thank you. And both of you have such an incredible journey. Obviously, I've heard it before, but I'm assuming that the folks who are joining us today are as excited and inspired to hear it for the first time as I am to hear it for the 10th time. So thank you for sharing with as much depth. And Angel, last but not least, tell us about you.
Yeah, no, look, and Aymara, Vicente, it goes without saying, I truly admire everything you guys have accomplished. I could hear that story a million times. I absolutely love it. But good morning to everyone. My name is Angel Luis Gonzalez Jr., but the only one that calls me that is my mom, and that's usually when I'm in deep trouble. I manage athlete icons and sports originals at Facebook. I'm a first-generation Cuban American. I was born and raised right there in Miami Lakes, Florida. And I'm incredibly proud of my Corralillo, Cárdenas, Cerradura, Baracoa, y La Habana Cuban roots. That's where my grandparents and parents are from. Like Vicente, I'm a proud product of Belen Jesuit. And because of that, I drove by FIU literally every single day on my way to and from school. My brother, my aunt, countless friends and family have graduated from FIU. So it's safe to say that I'm very familiar with the university and the incredible impact it's had on our community and people all around the world. Let's see, I was, like Vicente, I was a multi-sport athlete in high school. Ended up playing collegiate football at a small university in East Tennessee called Carson Newman. After graduating in 2003 with international economics and finance degree, I hung up my cleats for good and went back home to Miami to start my career. Throughout my career, I've had a variety of different roles, and we would probably need a few more hours in order to discuss them all. But the one constant was that I was very fortunate throughout all these different roles to build deep, enduring relationships with great people along the way, like Vicente and Aymara. Whether they were family members, mentors, friends, colleagues that became family, each of them inspired and supported and helped shape me into the person I am today. It turns out one of these like super precious relationships actually launched my career in sports back in 2010 when I co-founded a company to manage athletes. And it's what subsequently opened the door for me to join Facebook in 2014. I mean, when I initially joined Facebook, there was much simpler times back then. It was to manage athlete partnerships, which back then basically consisted of like, hey, let's encourage you to leverage your, the limelight that you have in your sport and post cool behind the scenes photos, engage with fans in the comments and whatnot. Thankfully, our product features and functionalities, along with my role, has evolved quite a bit throughout the last 6.5 years, which I look forward to discussing in more detail today. So thank you for having me.
Excellent. Wonderful. Well, thank you all. So just kind of one more setting the stage a little bit question. I'm assuming that folks in our audience are very familiar with the world that with the life that we're currently living and the changes that we've all had to make, given that we've all had to adjust personally and professionally over the last 6-7 months in relation to COVID and in relation to how that has affected economies, both virtual and in person. And so if you can tell us a little bit about kind of the world of sports media and how that has evolved over the last couple of months, especially given that many athletic activities have been completely frozen. And so where have we been over the last 6-7 months, and where are we as the economies start to slowly reopen?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this and kick it off. But yeah, look, this is like nothing that any of us could have ever imagined. I mean, with games not being played for such a long period of time, we've seen leagues, teams, athletes, sports media companies have to get incredibly creative with the content that they create and share with their fans. And it ranges everywhere from like repurposing archival footage and highlights to airing tentpole documentaries like The Last Dance with Michael Jordan way earlier than initially anticipated, to athletes having newfound time and investing heavily in things like they probably never thought they would be doing, like at-home, fitness content. IG Live is booming, and things like Facebook gaming. That way, they're broadcasting what they're playing on Xbox and PlayStation, etc. So it's been quite the evolution, and something that I forget. Before this year, we were sitting in Miami for the Super Bowl this year, and we hosted a little happy hour event, and I was sitting there with Vicente Amar and a bunch of our sports partners throughout the industry, and it's nothing that any of us could have imagined then. So it's been an absolutely incredible and truly trying time in the sports world.
Yeah, to continue sort of that line of thought, all the sports fans, that we know around us, right? Like, we've never had a period of time without sports for as long as we did. Like, in terms of no baseball season being delayed, March Madness being canceled. Really now, this past month, we finally had the return of sports, at least American sports, with Major League Soccer and the MLB. And now it's continuing to open up. But it was a period of time where you saw the appetite that fans have for sports, with that Last Dance coming out and setting completely new records for documentary series viewing. It was apparent, how ready the world was for sports to come back and have that, a happy distraction that sports can be, and sort of that hopefulness that, your team winning can bring. On our end, it's been really interesting. Even though sports have been paused, we've been receiving more opportunities than ever, because leagues, teams, brands, athletes, sports organizations are looking for ways to continue connecting with fans from home, even while the sports hiatus has been happening. And now that sports are returning, but they're returning in a different form, with stadiums that, for the most part, are excluding fans, right? So fans are viewing from home while the competition is happening in person. They're looking to fill in some of those experiences that fans have historically come to know and love. And they're looking for ways to, engage fans virtually. And I think it's leading to a really creative period for the sports industry in terms of creating tools and thinking about what the future of sports fan engagement can look like, primarily through digital, as well as, just creating new ways to engage fans in general. So it's been a really interesting period of time for us in that regard. Thankfully, we are seeing some sports start to return in a way that, is being regimented and being played in a safe way. And hopefully that gets to continue, because, obviously sports when it's done well, can have a really positive impact on society.
And if I could say, also as a marketer, I find it always very interesting to see how people are communicating with each other and how things change with lifestyles depending on what's going on in our world. And interestingly enough, like Vicente mentioned prior, what really turned our company into growth was the emoji keyboard that allowed people to connect with each other, and with these sports designed emojis that represented who they were, their passion when they were watching games, or just in general, a good day. So what's become, I think for most of us, our smartphone, right, has become an extension of our being in so many ways, almost to the point of we need to find a way to control it. But, you know, how many times do we go to text something to someone, because that's become such a big way of communicating, and instead of writing a word or two, we send an emoji, right? It's a colorful, vivid, I call it like today's hieroglyphics. It just says so much in a visual fashion. So I believe that during these very trying times, this is actually a almost fun and an interesting way that we can communicate with each other through texting, through these sports branded emojis that at least, like Vicente says, continue to keep that hope out there of things that are to come.
Sure. And kind of piggybacking a little bit of that comment, just thinking about existing trends, I think obviously sports media and sports management is not my area of expertise, but in some of the industry verticals that I do have a lot more visibility into, I would say that the pandemic has accelerated, as much as it has created a lot of disruption, it has also accelerated some existing trends. And so I'm wondering what you all think about the existing trends. Has that been the case in sports media engagement and entertainment? And what have been the trends that have been accelerated due to the last, 6 months?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because we have product roadmaps, and Vicente, I'm sure you and Amara, you guys have your product roadmaps of all the things that you guys want to roll out. You have like a 1, a 3, a 5, maybe a 10-year timeline, and it seems like that entire thing got pushed into about 6 months. It's truly remarkable. I think if I'm going to touch on like areas where I see things potentially going to, is that even though leagues are attempting this like way to reopen, whether you're talking about the NBA or MLB right now, we really don't know when fans are going to be allowed back in stadiums. And I think even when they are allowed, what the capacity is going to be at and what constraints are going to be put in place to keep people safe. And we anticipate that the at-home viewing experience will continue to improve. It's inevitable. That was going to happen no matter what, and this just truly accelerated that. And when you think of it right now, it's kind of been the same way for about 50 years, where you're watching it on a television, sitting on the other side of the room, and you're sitting on a couch watching it on that 2D environment. But we're already starting to see what things that are much more immersive, like Oculus VR, for example, bring to the table, where you could potentially be sitting courtside at an NBA game, look to your left, look to your right, be sitting around people in a virtual world, and have somebody like Steph Curry standing what feels like 2 feet away from you, taking a three-point shot. So that's the trend that I think we're going to see quickly accelerating, just truly because of the nature of the state of the world that we're in.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's thinking about connection. So much of sports is based on connection to your friends who are fans of the team, to your family who roots for the opposite team, to the athletes themselves, to what you grew up rooting for. Those connections have always been really strong, and they continue to be strong, but now they're evolving in a way that leagues and teams and athletes and platforms and brands have thought about for a long time. But now they're forced to take the steps, as Angel mentioned, that they were thinking about okay, maybe we'll do that next year. Maybe we'll plan for that 5 years from now. It's about how do you maintain those strong connections or create even stronger connections while fans may not be together in person. Obviously on our side, the emojis and the AR is all about connection communication. And we've seen a big uptick in usage and opportunity there. But also, as Angel mentioned, connection goes also like athlete to consumer directly. And you have things like athletes or organizations, one of our partners, the Olympic Channel Olympics, are very much focused on connecting with fans at home and doing things even like working out from home, right? As the world looks different, not only from a viewing perspective, but also from like an athletic perspective and going to the gym or going to compete, in recreational basketball or sports. That's all evolved. And I think what's happening now is they're reconfiguring the connection that exists between fans and the different pieces of sports that you engage with over the course of the season and over the course of the year. And that's going to lead, I think, to some really exciting growth. And we'll see how, once we are able to get back in stadiums and arenas at full capacity, how those two balance each other out. But I do think that, you know, long term, there are going to be a lot of fans who are going to be very happy and excited to, you know, stay home, and not just for Sundays and watching the Red Zone channel, but just generally speaking, teams and leagues and partners and sort of platforms are going to equip them with experiences that make it a really fun at-home viewing experience that almost makes you feel like you're at the game with all of the tools you have at your disposal to share and enjoy.
Well, so aside from this, I think this is really intriguing and exciting for sports viewers, as well as for people who are not avid sport viewers, but may become, given the degree of increased technological sophistication and kind of experiential sophistication that you are all describing. Obviously, you know, just thinking about our audience in mind, aside from things like AR, AI, AR, VR, kind of, which are cross-cutting across industry in terms of sophistication and what we think of as the future of technology, what would you say, kind of, what does innovation look like today in this universe of sports media and sports content that we're trying to re-engage around, obviously accelerated by the pandemic? What feels like it's cutting edge now, and what would you expect to be cutting edge, let's say, a year from now?
I think on my side, one thing that I've been really interested in is not only the idea of bringing sports to fans at home, but bringing fans into the stadium where where the action is happening. And you're starting to see a little bit of that, like implementing crowd noise from home. Like you know, for example, during the NFL draft, you had a campaign by I think it was Bud Light that was "Boo the Commissioner," and you could like boo the commissioner from home with your hashtags. But like you also had, and it was, you know, the NFL played into it. But I think the idea of like trying to get the fan noise, which is so important to the game experience, not only for the fans who are watching on television, but for the athletes in person as well. Like the idea of trying to get the fans into the stadium to impact the game from home is really interesting. I know, you know, if you turn on an MLB game right now, you'll see like cutouts of people behind the dugout, right? And I think that's going to evolve massively over the next year in terms of, it's not going to be cutouts, right? But it's like, really, how do you, and maybe it is AR, maybe it's sort of a virtual screen, which you'll see some with Major League Soccer and the NBA. But the idea of how do you get fans into the stadium? On the AR front, there are cool things like, you know, portals where you walk into the stadium even though you're not there, but you're doing it from home. But more so like for the actual viewing experience and for the athletes, the idea of getting fans into the stadium and arena to impact the game, crowd noise, I think that's really interesting. I think it's just at the beginning of us as an industry starting to think about it. So I'm not sure where it's going to go, but I feel pretty strongly that that's going to evolve over the next year or two.
Yeah, look, I totally agree with everything Vicente said. I think we look at innovation in two specific buckets when it pertains to sports media. You look at it from a consumption perspective, and then from a connection perspective, two things that I think we've touched on. From a consumption experience perspective, you're talking about like the Oculus Vr stuff. That is cutting edge. That is, I mean, something that when you put that in, and that's the thing today, you're putting on this like big, you know, kind of helmet or glasses or whatever it might be, but technology continues to get smaller and smaller and smaller. So what does that next iteration look like? It might not even require this like headset that can potentially, you know, block you from whatever's actually happening in your living room. So I am really excited about what the future holds from a consumption experience perspective. From a connection perspective, look, it's why we were so excited about partnering with Sports Manias. We always think of the various ways that we can help athletes and the people that actually move the needle within the sports ecosystem connect with their fan bases. And one of the things that I think Vicente, I'm not really letting the cat out of the bag. I think you kind of did this a bit earlier, but with AR effects, we're really excited. Here in the next couple of weeks, we're not talking about, again, this truncated timeline where these things probably would have happened later on, but now they're happening in the next couple of weeks. We're really excited what that's going to look like and what we're going to be able to unveil with some of the top athletes in the world because of the work that companies like Sports Manias are doing.
So I don't mean to take us into a controversial question, but I've been very delighted that the impression that all of you have, despite the fact that there's been some changes and some large unknowns, is really optimistic and really excited about the future of kind of the industry in general, of sports in general, of fan engagement and kind of fan opportunities in general. So I've personally been very delighted by that. But I would be remiss if I didn't ask, what worries you, right? So there's still some big unknowns. There are some large questions. I don't even mean from the COVID perspective, but just in general as the industry evolves. And so what are your biggest I don't want to say concerns, but what are your biggest either open questions or things that could be cause for worry or concern, or that you are calculating on the liability side of how you plan for your companies?
So for us, I think there's, two things that concern me. I mean, first of all, like the idea of some of like a delay, right, to some of these really important seasons, especially of like here in the United States as football season approaches, that will have a massive impact on the sports industry in general. I mean, already, right, like not having fans in stadium obviously impacts a tremendous amount of people, from the clubs and the teams to the vendors. Like there's a big impact happening there, and I think that is a concern for the sports industry. It leads to some opportunities on the digital front, and obviously we're thinking about it from a digital perspective, but I think there is concern there, and there's a lot of great sports industry executives and sports people who are working in the sports industry, period, right, at different levels, that are going to be impacted by that negatively, including like, a delay in the football season could have a major impact on broadcasters, right? Even though I do think once like the games are back, there's going to be as much tune-in as ever because people really want it and they're going to be watching from home. A delayed season could really, have a big impact on everyone, especially the broadcasters. But just removing the in-person experience is going to impact a lot of people's lives in a way that's difficult, right? So we're trying to drive forward digital growth, which will hopefully allow some of those people with great sports experience to transition, into new roles, in the new role that we're looking at. So for me, it's the delay of seasons is one, and the second is, we're already seeing it, right, with Major League Baseball as an example, where the Marlins opening day, has been delayed because players are being tested for COVID, and and you have scenarios that have never happened before, right, where you're going to have players and teams that are going to have to not compete, and it's going to just lead to a really, until things settle, it's going to be a landscape that is constantly evolving and that is causing everyone around it, right, because we're all about connecting and communicating around sports, is causing everyone around it to adapt very quickly. And if things go sideways, it will definitely have a big impact on everybody who works in sports, in terms of if a season is delayed or if all of a sudden there's a big outbreak and a season has to be canceled. We've already had some of that. Thankfully, sports is returning and it seems to be doing so successfully, but there is definitely risk. And there's already people who are being impacted in a negative way. And we're hopeful on our side that the digital growth will lead to new opportunities for those individuals. But that's still yet to be determined as we continue moving forward. And the growth is happening now, right? It's not like the adapting is happening now, and the growth in terms of new opportunities and roles should come later.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think as I think about it, there's probably two questions that I have. And the most important one, and to answer your initial question, I am an eternal optimist. I'm always constantly looking for like those silver linings and those opportunities. And if you find that one thing, trust me, and Amara Vicente can attest to this, we go after full bore. I think that's in our nature, and as Cubans in general, we never lose hope. But the thing is that, when it comes to sports, the main thing it needs is a consistent sports calendar. Without a consistent sports calendar, it's very hard to talk and execute any of the things that we're talking about right now. Sports is the greatest, most consistent content generator that exists, above movies, above anything else. You literally, I mean, think about the US alone. There's in a normal year, there's only 2 days in the entire calendar year that do not have professional sports games, the day before and the day after MLB All-Star. We've just gone through this phase of over 100 days with no professional sports games. That's just unprecedented. So to answer your question, what keeps me up at night, what's like the thing that needs to really start happening immediately, is that consistency. Because without that consistency of a sports calendar, sports in the sports world can't properly function. I think the other question that kind of comes to mind is when we inevitably do come back, what will this period of time kind of do to the way that sports is consumed? And will that further propel the snackable, shorter form content that people have become more accustomed to, like consuming things like, I don't know, House of Highlights or even, NFL Red Zone. So I'm curious, those are my two things. One, consistency in sports calendar, and then two, the longer lasting effects of hey, we haven't had full games for a long time that take, 3 to 4 hours. And now that we go back, like, what will that consumption experience look like? And I think leagues are going to have to answer that question properly.
And if I could say, I think I'm kind of like the dinosaur in the room, because I have, with my years of experience and my age, have experienced the world changing, I think, more than a lot of people. Like I said, from the beginning, I actually saw the internet being born and experienced that, the smartphone coming into our lives. How could we live without a smartphone, right? Today, social media, that is our life. So like, I again, I reiterate what Angel was saying. I think the Cuban spirit is about optimism and finding new ways, embracing change. And I think our world will continue to evolve. Absolutely. Technology just has a life of its own. But the idea is to embrace that change. It's going to be part of our lives, adapt and align with what works best for the consumer, for the brand, for the product. And there are always creative ways to find new perspectives. And again, yes, there are challenges. Absolutely. We're living unprecedented times. It's very uncertain and it's sometimes, scary because there are things that we don't control. But those that we do, we can find ways to make creatively work for us, in my opinion.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I want to remind the audience to add their questions to the Q&A section, which we'll get to in a second. My last, or one of my last questions, I would say, is kind of taking a little bit of a more personal stance. All of you engage with colleagues, all of you engage with teams. You've run companies, you're running companies. So how have you adapted, and what has been kind of challenging, interesting, surprising for you as a leader during this time?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it probably, you could see it through the VC. I'm a people person. It's what I love.
No, not at all.
Not at all, right?
Such an introvert.
Yeah, total introvert. But I've literally built a career off of building strong relationships, and I think that's the part that I've missed a whole lot, especially as it pertains to like Facebook and being able to go into the office on a regular basis, and those water cooler casual hallway conversations with, quite frankly, senior leadership within our company, and they're like, oh man, how the kids doing? Oh, did you catch that game? And like those types of things you kind of miss out on, and you definitely miss out on. And then now they've become an email or a chat or potentially a VC that needs to be scheduled. Like that's the part that I really miss, is that human interaction. But I guess that's the negative side of that coin. On the positive side of that coin, I never saw the inside of like my colleagues' houses and stuff. I've never had more VCs interrupted by colleagues' kids, which I'm shocked that my kids haven't interrupted this one. So seeing those types of things has truly kind of surprised me in a positive way. Has built a lot of empathy on our team, to like really get a feel for what is it that people are like at home. Because one thing is what you see, 9 to 5 or whenever you're at the office or whatever. But now this has become our work environment, and people get to get a peek behind the curtain, if you will, of what real people are like and what your colleagues are like. And everybody's a real person dealing with real problems. And because of that, it has developed a lot of empathy, not just internally here at Facebook, but with our colleagues and everybody else that we deal with in the industry.
Yeah, I think on, to Angel's point about how this has given you an insight into people's personal lives, I think over these past months, on the calls that I've been on the video chats that I've been on the emails that I've been on, you've had people from different companies and internally asking how you're doing more than ever before. And that's been really nice and special to see, like, people genuinely caring about other people, not just, driving forward an initiative or a partnership they're trying to get done. It's like, hey, how are you doing? I know it's a tough time. And it's been really cool to see that. And I think we've definitely been trying to do that at Sportsmanias, because we understand, like, this has always been the case, with virtual connection, or even, just meeting on every once in a while. People's lives are changing, and obviously the work front is one thing, but there's a personal life behind it. But now it's become very evident, and it's been good to have that additional connection with people. And I think it allows for even deeper business opportunities once you are able, to check in with somebody and see that they're okay, and for them to, have that confidence that, you have a caring personal relationship and not just, a business incentive. On our side, we as a startup, and many startups, we were very much accustomed to working remotely ahead of this. So that hasn't been as big of a change for our internal team. We were always in constant communication, whether it was through Slack or, video calls. But it definitely has changed in the sense that, like, Imad and I were constantly traveling before this, to go meet great partners, like Angel, and that no longer has been the case. And it's been way more of a seamless switch, to like leading new potential opportunities together with our colleagues and our partners remotely than we anticipated. So it's been an interesting sort of period of discovery for us for both of those reasons.
And I think, again, there's the Cuban optimism and the Cuban resilience and innovation and grit, right? We will find ways to make it come through in some way in the most positive fashion that you can with these circumstances.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, if I may, one of the things that to me is most interesting, and I'm an organizational psychologist, and my background is suddenly the conversation about personal resilience is really on the table, right? And so we're not just talking about how, most employers in the US are small businesses. And so we are very much talking about what helps those businesses across industry survive, but we're also talking about the individual within those entities and what's needed for people to have a broader resilience toolkit. So, and that's not a conversation that generally managers or leaders have as strongly positioned. So I think it's a good thing in that regard. All right, let's see our audience questions. Okay, let's start. Okay, so based on your experience, this is from Ashley. Based on your experience thus far, what are some tips you can give those looking to work in digital media? Whoever wants to take that.
Sure. So, the thing that, like, when I was, I felt like I wanted to go into digital media when we were starting Sports Manias, and I wasn't sure how it would develop. And what's been interesting to me for a lot of the people in digital media, a lot of the people that we work with, nobody has had, like, very rarely has there been like a straightforward path. It's sort of been like, bouncing around to get into the positions. I think the main thing that everybody has because of that is adaptability, right? Like, the digital landscape is changing so fast that obviously it's great to be learning skill sets right now, but it's the ability to adapt as the digital media landscape adapts and to whatever roles are out there, right? Like, even if you don't have the skill sets right now, because of the type of work that this calls for, like, it's okay, like, run with the opportunity and learn it, because that's what continually is happening for all of us, I think, working in digital media. The other thing is, using digital media tools to go find those opportunities is incredibly important, right? Like, obviously, we're all on LinkedIn, and but just using sort of your connections and digitally doing so, at least for us, has been a major driver, right? As we seek out new opportunities, we'll check in with people that maybe we haven't talked to in a while, but because of the nature of things, we can now, and just check in and see how they're doing and share ideas and see if anything comes of it. I think those are the two things. One is adaptability, and taking sort of chances, knowing that you're going to be adaptable or need to be adaptable. And then the second is digital connections as a way to open doors for yourself. Those are the two things that we have at least found on our side are very helpful, and I think can carry over to sort of any individual out there.
Yeah, look, totally agree. I only add to that where you need to be learning continuously. Don't ever stop. So, like, if you have this opportunity to educate yourself in anything that you're truly passionate about, and if it is digital media, Ashley, I encourage you to kind of continue to educate yourself in that field. But I can't stress this enough. I was an international economics and finance major, and here I am managing athlete icons and sports originals at Facebook. The path that like your life is going to take is never like this perfect linear path. Coming out of college, my very first job was selling fresh seafood, which, if you want to cut your teeth in sales, I recommend you doing that. trying to sell something that's going to rot in about 24 to 48 hours. And then, you know, but I took all of these different, you know, careers and every single role that I had, I took all of the learnings from that. And I just continue to compound upon that and learn from each of these things and apply those in each of the new jobs that I was in. All the while being a diehard sports fan and wanting to get back to the sports world. And then just waiting for that correct opportunity to be able to do it. And when that opportunity came, being prepared to be able to actually seize it. So like that's the I guess sage advice that I could provide from my worldly experience.
Yeah, and I think in general, just being proactive. I think as a person, whatever it is that you do, you have to do 100%, if not 150 or 200%. I mean, you open your own doors. You can't wait for doors to be open for you. So, you know, you have to research, find opportunities. If you're in digital, build your brand by creating digital influencing aspects of whatever it is that you aspire to do. Do it yourself so that when you have the opportunity to be interviewed by someone, you have something to show for it. That's I think in general, for any profession true, is to give complete attention to your goal by doing today what you can do most best.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, let's do a couple of quick ones. One is in your opinion, how far is the media from this evolution of content? Do you think they're on the right path? And the other one, which I'll say now, because it's kind of related, is what are your thoughts on the Disney bubble experience for athletes? Are you guys working on any behind the scenes content?
Well, we won't divulge if we're working on any behind the scenes content, but it is, you know, look, it's the craziest experiment that any of us have ever seen, and we're seeing instances of it working because, you know, the games are coming back. But then I was reading an article this morning about like the LA Clippers and the fact that just they haven't done anything wrong. It's just they're dealing with things in their daily lives. And Doc was talking about that, how an athlete had to leave the bubble to attend to a family matter. But because they left the bubble, now they're essentially, they need to be quarantined for X amount of time before they could be, you know, reintegrated into the team. That makes things very difficult. To answer the first part of that question, I think, you know, talking about accelerating timelines, there's parts of the media world that they were reluctant. They were kind of stuck in their old ways of like doing things, whether you're talking about, you know, newspapers or whatever it might be. And they were hesitant to kind of break away from that and kind of jump on the coattails of like truly the wave of the future. I think this period of time has kind of left people with like that no option, like, oh, wait a second, we really do have to do this to Vicente's point earlier, go to where the eyeballs are and engage with fans where they are, as opposed to just expecting them to, you know, come to us. And that's if we would have had that question, I don't know, 6 months ago, it would have been a different answer. But now where we are, I think we're definitely, and sports media in general is accelerating in the right direction.
Yeah, on my side, the Disney bubble is fun, right? Like in sort of the social media age and in meme culture, like you see these guys and these athletes posting live stories of themselves or trying to tell a story of what's going on in the Disney bubble because everybody's curious about what it's like. And that's fun content. Obviously, the players have gotten in trouble for sharing too much. But as athletes, like there's so many storylines that are like, not only on the field and on the court, but off the field and off the court. And the fact that they're getting to give peeks and insight into that as much as they're allowed, I think is a lot of fun. I think obviously it's challenging being in a bubble and not being able to break out, especially when you have that many athletes and that many you know, people who are used to being very active. So it's definitely got pros and cons, but from an entertainment standpoint, I think the Disney bubble is sort of a fun concept, and I think it's playing out as such. In terms of the evolution of media, I think we are on the right track. I think we're still a ways away from what we will end up at. You know, as Angel mentioned earlier, the media is fast tracking and platforms are fast tracking ideas that they had had previously, right? So now is going to be a period of creating, testing, and then refining. And there's definitely a lot of testing and refining that I think is to come. But I think we are on the right track. Because we're now actively creating, right? Which was the first step, which was backlogged by a lot of different priorities previously. now we're creating, and we'll see those results, and we'll get better from there once we see those results.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to wrap us up because I know we're running out of time. So 2 quick ones. They're completely unrelated. So one is, has this pandemic changed the way sports are held and marked for the future? And the other one is specifically for Angel, how is the Cuban community at Facebook and in the Bay Area?
Yep. Yeah, so I mean, as far as sports is concerned, yeah, look, it fundamentally changed everything in the future. We're very optimistic. We had some incredible plans ready for the Olympics that everything got to be, it was essentially had to be put on hold. So we're really excited about what the future holds, but at the same time, kind of holding our breath and waiting for what's to come. As far as the Cuban community, as most places, they all gravitate towards one another, and there's a very strong Latinx community just in general. Whether you're talking about our CMO, Antonio Lucio, who's Latin as well, and or all the way on down to people like me. There's a very strong Latin community and Cuban community, which we're all very proud of, and it makes it. It makes it a really fun place to work when you could sit there and be able to relate to people on a very personal level. Everyone that's Cuban has experienced this at some point when you're sitting across the table from someone and all of a sudden you turn to them and you're like, oh, where are you from? It's like, and you hear like that little accent in the back of their voice and you're like, wait a second, tú eres cubano. And it's like, and from that point on, forget about it. It's all downhill from there. So we have a robust community that we're very proud of at Facebook. Thank you for asking the question.
Yeah, and in terms of how sports are held, Ahmad and I are talking about this all the time. We definitely think it's different. And again, that goes all levels, right? From like high school sports and trying to figure out like the competition and sort of the balancing of, students and families with competition and the way that sports can impact people's lives in a positive way, to the collegiate and professional space where even when fans are allowed to return, it may not be at maximum capacity, and it's going to be incredibly strange and different to see, like to be at a game and experiencing it where it's not a completely full stadium, and it's purposefully not a completely full stadium. So I definitely think, and that trickles down from the fan experience, and even, some of our partners, some of these brands are thinking about in-person activations, right? You all have always had in the tailgating, right, or around the stadium, sort of calls to action to interact with brands, and that's going to look a little bit different now too. A lot more contactless and a lot of trying to incentivize fans in a way that they can do on their phones and take home with them and share for people who aren't at the game, because there's going to be less people. So yeah, I think the holding of sports is going to be very different, and that goes from all the different levels of competition, including recreational and collegiate and high school.
Creativity will have to rule somehow.
I think we all agree with that. I'll cheers to that with my water, not my wine. It's not that time of the day yet. Well, thank you all for joining. Vicente, Aymara, and Angel, thank you. This was a really great conversation. Thank you for all of the guests who participated and joined across FIU and the community in general. And thank you obviously to Casa Cuba and FIU for hosting, and we look forward to the next conversation.
Thank
Have
you.
a wonderful rest of your days.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye.